In a game that was representative of the entire season, the Eagles beat down the Packers and end their season. What does this mean for the Green Bay Packers moving forward? Stay tuned to find out.
Yeah, I've been wanting this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better. Okay. Hey. Yeah. Ain't no errors, baby. It's a new era. I wake up early feeling rich like I'm Kesha.
Welcome in another episode of Sounds Gouda. Thank you for everyone for coming back and taking a listen to us. I'm one of your two co-hosts. My name is Rob Ralph. Next to me is my best friend, Jordan Olson. Just know that we do have new content every Wednesday and Saturday on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. If you know a Packer friend that would like to nerd out just as much as we do for the Packers, please be sure to send them our show. So, Jordan, the Packers head down to Philadelphia, and what was really representative of the entire season, especially against bigger type of opponents, or juggernauts, as we've liked to call them. The Packers lose to the Philadelphia Eagles 22-10. I feel like for a year, this game was 10-0 there for a while. So, I mean, we'll talk about the defense, but kudos to the defense for really coming to play in this game, which was very not like the Packers and throughout playoff history, at least in the last 10 to 15 years. But Jordan, I'm just going to give you the floor. There's a ton of angles, different things we can go at. But how are you feeling coming out of this, and what does this mean for the Packers moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, anytime a season ends and, you hear the players talk about it, but as a fan, I consume the Packers 365 days a year. Today's Tuesday when we're recording this, so we're 2 days removed now, going on 2 days removed. And, yesterday was really day one of a new season. And when you spend that amount of time invested into something that comes to an end like it did on Sunday, it's hard not to have heartbreak over that unless it ends in anything but hoisting the Lombardi trophy, right? So a lot of emotions. There were a lot of great things that happened this year. And then obviously in the last few weeks, we kind of saw the writing on the wall. We became unsure if we were going to be able to overcome some of our deficiencies that haunted us throughout the entirety of the year. And as you've already mentioned, all those big, ugly things came right back to rear their head and haunt us in this game. And right from the opening kickoff, that Keyshawn Nixon fumble, and we're not going to spend any time talking about whether it was a penalty or if we recovered, but we didn't. That's the fact of the matter. And 3 plays later, the Eagles have a 7-0 lead. And it kind of felt like right there that you already knew the outcome of the game. Obviously you tried to remain hopeful through something like that, but the Packers did not show us any evidence that they would win a game after starting down like that. One quick thing before I throw it back to you, because I don't want to ramble, is I am very proud of this team for their fight. Every game that they lost, as we know, they did lose 6 big games against, 3 teams this season, the Eagles, the Vikings, and the Lions, and they could not overcome any 3 of those teams. But this team showed a hell of a lot of fight. The defense really improved, and who would have thought that the defense would have been the better unit at the end of the year in the final game? I would have never predicted that going into the season, and that gives me a lot of hope. So, I don't know. What do you think? What are your immediate reflections, bigger picture things before we dive into some of the minutia?
Yeah, I mean, the writing was on the wall as soon as Nixon took that and got that helmet to helmet or targeting. I'll call it for what it is, but like you said, it didn't end up working our way. It followed a familiar path and a familiar rhythm, right? There's penalties, turnovers. Hey, Brandon McManus for the first time in postseason misses a field goal. Of course, of course. And mental errors. I will say too, obviously, injuries do not help us. And, the loss of, we've talked about this, Christian Watson, ad nauseum, but obviously that one really hurt us too for the wide receivers. But when Elton Jenkins went out of this game, that was just brutal. You want to know how important the left guard is, especially one of the best, defensive lines in the league. That's how important he is. And then the holding. I still have a question mark too on why. I think some other Packers podcasts have brought this up too, but why Travis Glover initially over Kadeem Telfort? who I think has been in more game situation type of scenarios. I think Glover might has come in for a few snaps at like when a game is out of hand. I think he was in for maybe San Francisco and the end of San Francisco and the end of New Orleans, which those games were like way, way out of hand. But anybody watching this game is like, who just came in for Elton Jenkins, right? If you know, and you can go ahead.
Us diehard sickos, we know who Travis Glover is, right? Because we spent off-season talking about him, but 13 snaps coming into it. I mean, like, even for Jordan Morgan, if he had only played 13 snaps all year, somebody that has first-round pedigree, that's a pretty tall task for them to come in and try to manage at that point in time. I agree, why not Kadeem Telfort? I also have questions about, like, you pull Monk out there and you're warming him up, and, you know, I know that I never expected him to play because he had been inactive for like every game this season. But that whole situation was odd too. Like, oh, go get warmed up. We think, are you going to get in the game? And then we have a little bit different rotation. It was better after Telfort entered.
Oh, it was,
but
it wasn't Elton Jenkins. Obviously, there's not a lot that are like Elton Jenkins. He's just that superior of a left guard, which is how important that is, right? And sorry to interrupt you too, but like that just brings me to like the offensive struggles and like the Jordan Love development case or scenario. At the beginning of this year too, and it was evident even in the first game down in Brazil, man, I thought that this wide receiver core was just going to take a next step. I don't know necessarily, and we talked about this ad nauseum too, if the Packers truly did need a wide receiver one, an alpha, or if they just could have a whole bunch of wide receiver 2/3s, if that's what you feel like this group is. But I'm just, the passing attack, and especially like later on down the season, you would figure a good running game would be able to help this offense. And how were you surprised that the Packers weren't under center as much, that they were in shotgun quite a bit? I'm a little confused on the lack of play action too. There wasn't much of that used, especially how much, obviously you wanted to run against the Philadelphia Eagles, and I think they kind of wore them down there a little bit late. Obviously, Josh Jacobs had that amazing, bully run, but the Matt LaFleur system, it's designed to make things simpler for the quarterback, right? Via motion, scheme reads, quick passes. Yet the ease and the rhythm we're missing in that final stretch in those games. I'm just kind of curious on what your thoughts are. It felt like Matt LaFleur also, to me, was calling games not to lose rather than to win. And maybe that was just the scenario. Maybe the wide receivers and the injury to Christian Watson, being injured there towards the end of the season there as well. But I felt like it heavily regressed. What are your overall thoughts on the offense, the lack of play action, the wide receivers, Jordan Love's development, Matt LaFleur's play calling and scheme and details at the end of the season?
There's like a podcast episode in like every one of those questions alone right there to wrap up the season. Just to touch on a couple things, and then I'll get back to your question of what is the root of the offensive struggles, and is it on Jordan, is it on the receivers development? The offensive line injury to Elton Jenkins was pretty damning, as we've acknowledged, and I know that we drafted Jordan Morgan, and we probably felt pretty good about our 7 top linemen going into the season. And, I kind of thought that Jacob Monk was a really good 8th option, and I don't know what the team was so uncomfortable, why they were so uncomfortable with him after how great he looked in the preseason, the praise he got from the coaches, ready to rip guys' lips off. I don't know. And Josh Myers, he obviously got hurt in this game too. And then you insert Sean Ryan at center, and I think our offensive line is going to be fine. But just like early indication is we're going to get Jordan Morgan back. I don't know what we're going to do at center, but we probably need to find a little bit more depth at that position too, because once those guys went out, and some of it's just playing experience, that was really a game wrecker for us. And just to touch on the injuries too, and I'll get to your question. Like for the first time this season, you have all those things going on, the penalties, the turnovers, the mistakes, and then you compound that with these 5 injuries. Dobbs went out with the concussion, and man, I really hope that Dobbs is doing okay right now. I haven't heard a lot about him at this point in time. There's people talking about will he play again. I think that his brain will have time to heal. But, and I love Romeo and I want him to play. And I'll just personally say I hope that he does whatever's best for him and his family because, it's not worth walking around like a mashed potato to play football. Now, people are going to think this is a bunch of bullshit too. But recently I attended a professional development conference and listened to one of the top neurologists in the world come and speak to us. Works with the Detroit Lions, the Pistons, works with the U.S. ski team, and debunked a lot of myths about concussions. And one thing that he did say is this is kind of new information, or maybe not mainstream, but if the brain has a full chance to heal, the risk of concussion is not any worse than if you'd never had one to begin with. And like, maybe I'm not scientifically, nobody quote me on this perfectly, but that's the concept. If your brain heals fully, and he will have a full off season to heal, that he should be able to come back and play football again and not to be too worried about that. So that I find that fascinating in that discussion, whether he should play again. Ultimately, he's going to be the one that needs to decide if that's the best thing for him. And I think he loves ball, and I think he'd probably decide to play. We'll see. But Wyatt went out early in this game. Reed went out with that dislocation. And on top of all of the other things that we've talked about, the injuries, those things were ultimately too much to overcome. We'll talk about this offseason now. The Dobbs injury totally, if he decides that the future is in the balance for him and Christian Watson missing the entirety of, or most of the upcoming season, the receiver now becomes a big need for us. So that's kind of a segue back into your question of, did the receivers do enough to develop this year? What is the root of our offensive issue? And I don't know. I think that there's blame on Matt LaFleur. I think that there's blame on Jordan Love.
As well as there should be some criticism coming out of this.
And I think that there's blame on a lot of these young Packers players. I know that Matt LaFleur sounds like he's saying the right things in the locker room. He expects these guys to prepare to a certain level, and he's shared his displeasure with, he said to one of the reporters that was his worst half of football the worst half of football this team has played this season. So obviously he was disappointed in the response by the players. So, I don't know. I think Matt LaFleur has been probably getting a little bit of paralysis by analysis. I think he has a lot of options. I think he overwhelms himself and maybe outcoaches himself, which we've talked a little bit about before.
Yeah, that's a good point.
He has to reflect a lot this offseason on building in some of those easy throws. I know they want to be run first, but I almost feel like the Packers are a more balanced team when they get their passing game going early, and then can use the running game to really balance that out, use play action. And then the last thing we're having some long-winded responses today, is I heard this. Jordan Love was one of the worst this year in true dropbacks, 3-step drops, 5-step drops, 7-step drops, and hitting his targets. So whether that was a result of his injury and his footwork confidence, decision-making, the plays that Matt LaFleur's calling, the wide receivers getting open, Jordan was not good at finding and hitting those guys. And I'm going to have to watch some tape this offseason to see if I can actually bring something tangible to the table, a solution that I can provide. But I think there's all parties involved need to work on something. And then the other thing with that is that the wide receivers did not help Jordan out a lot this season with all of the drops.
Yeah,
and I don't know how you fix that this offseason, but the players have to kind of look into themselves and see if they can fix that drop problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that it's warranted? We're going to have a lot of cap space, and I just want you to touch on this quick because I still know we got to go to the defensive side of the ball. But as far as like free agents goes, and maybe I think we'll touch on this in further pods though too, a little bit as well. what would you, if they did another Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs, them were they being Brian Gutekunst, where would you like them to splash money at? And I already know your answer before you're going to say it.
Whether it's, and I've already done a little bit of research, I'm not quite fully ready to unveil my full plan for the off season because I'm still scheming, but I have a lot of initial thoughts. I've looked at the upcoming free agent classes. Well, I'll just start with position of need.
Yes.
On the defense, corner, defensive end, or edge. And depending on what they do with TJ Slayton, we probably need an interior defensive lineman as well. Keep this short. I don't like the free agent class for defensive ends, and there are a lot of them rated in the top 60. I think we probably go with a draft there. Corner is going to be a little bit harder to find. I don't see as many guys that are sprinkled in that top 60, but there are a few prospects that I like. And there are some good defensive linemen, interior defensive lineman prospects. That's probably a little bit richer in the free agent market, but most of the corners and the defensive ends on the free agent market that I see are probably a little bit older and a little bit more washed than the Packers would want to spend money on this offseason. So, I don't know, something interesting to think about. Do you have any other areas that you would spend or invest in on that side of the ball?
Yeah, I mean, cornerback, spot on, right? There's no way Jair Alexander is coming back. I would be absolutely shocked. And I think he was asked to speak to the media and said, nope, no thanks. I don't even know if I'm going to be here next year. So writing's on the wall with that. I do like what we have in Carrington Valentine. Eric Stokes, right? I'd be, again, injury history. I think he's had one pass deflected and one interception, and that was like in his first year. So again, too, something I'd be shocked at. So you can absolutely pencil in at least one for sure, if not two, high draft picks in for the cornerback position, just depending on how the board falls and whatnot. So you're spot on. It will be interesting too to see everybody's clamoring for a T. Higgins or a Tyreek Hill, and I just want everybody to just calm down on that narrative because, yeah, I mean, you never know. You never know. They could pull a Charles Woodson or a Reggie White, type of signing on that side of the ball. But I don't. Besides T. Higgins, and there is an argument that Tyreek Hill is getting over the hill as far as his age goes, and I think you've alluded to this as well, but he brings a ton of speed, and I think if there's anything we know in this offense that makes it really click is getting that speed and getting other people open.
Tyreek is not a player that I would bring onto this team by any means.
Don't kill Packers fandom for saying.
He asked off of a championship roster to get more money, and he went to another team to get that contract, and now he's mad that he's not winning, and he's on the wrong side of 30. So no, and I just don't. We'll see. We'll talk about the wide receiver position later on, but I don't see initial reflection as I don't see the Packers spending nearly half of their available cap money on one position. I don't see it.
So moving over to the other side of the ball then, to talk about, man, wow. Jordan, how long has it been since we've seen, especially when you're like, man, cornerback? Who's in for cornerback for us? Pass rush? We don't really have that much of a pass rush. Pretty good on the back end, right, with X, and Edrin Cooper obviously is a rising star for us. But how long has it been since you've seen a defensive performance like that in a playoff game for the Green Bay Packers?
A long time. I can't even just give you the game where they played that well. A couple years ago when we played against San Francisco, we didn't play that bad. There was obviously some mistakes, but weather was quite the factor. I don't know, maybe my memory's a little foggy on that one too. You kind of put me on the spot. I don't remember one in recent history, and the defense was not the reason that we lost this game. We put them in a bad spot right off the jump. They gave up the touchdown. They only had a 28-yard drive at that point in time, but they really held their own. A.J. Brown only had one reception. He's reading books in the game.
Inner excellence books, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know. Apparently that didn't have an immediate impact on his ability to go out and make an impact on this game. But, and then outside of the mercy that Saquon took on us and kind of when the writing was on the wall, we did a really great job of keeping their run defense their run game at bay and holding Saquon Barkley to a pretty manageable stat total. I think it totally had 119 yards, but only averaged 4.8 yards per carry. We contained Jalen Hurts. I don't know. I thought we had a pretty fair game. Carrington Valentine had a hard time covering Dallas Goedert.
Which,
I don't know. What are your thoughts?
well, yeah, on that one too. I mean, we all saw it, and then they're all up at the line. Of course, Jalen Hurts checks to that play. Who's making the check on the defensive side of the ball? To get back, and because I mean we all saw it. So I was kind of confused in that one, and then of course poor Carrington Valentine. Dallas Goedert's probably got what 50, 60 pounds on the dude. He's trying to just stiff-armed him into oblivion. Schematically, they just played winning football on that side. I thought they put them in a lot of really good positions. I thought, if anything, some of the plays that kind of broke out, maybe a Saquon Barkley run or two, and there wasn't many, resulted from poor tackling, but not from poor design for Jeff Hafley and this crew. And just looking at some of the stuff that they were doing, they had the Eagles offense in fits there, I want to say, for like 3 quarters or so, And besides that one play, right at the beginning where they gave up the touchdown, right? They only had, what, like you said, 28 yards. Oh, you can't really fault the defense for that one. So really, that defense held them, that potent Eagles offense, to 15 points, right? At 22-10, take off the 7. That's absolutely amazing. So
290 total yards, and again, some of those came at the end on that final drive when the game was like, totally decided at that point in time. So, you take away that Saquon run where he kind of kneeled down, and I know you can't take things away from games, but I mean, it's like we basically held the Eagles to 260 yards of total offense, which, if you would have told me we would have done that going into this game, I would have bet a lot of money that we would have won this game.
Yeah, absolutely. But, also too, just for like a cautionary tale as well, like we've seen this kind of play out before, right? Like some previous seasons under Joe Barry, where the defenses ended the year on a high note, right? Only to stumble early, the following season. So obviously we need to see some more consistency and continued improvement. And I do really think that if we get some more stars or talented people on that side of the ball, my feeling, and you can correct me if you feel differently, I really feel like this defense is ascending, and I hope that it continues to pick up from here.
Yeah, Rashawn Gary, in his words to the media after the game, they asked him about how he felt with this defense from now compared to the beginning of the season, and he said it was light years difference. Those weren't exactly his words, but that was his message. And I think people underestimate all the little nuances, on a blitz scheme or something, like I need to go off of this guy's shoulder, attack this gap exactly this way, or I'm working with my teammate on this stunt and I have my hand in the ground or the dirt versus, a stand up. And you can see that his play elevated, as the season went on, and he got a lot more comfortable. We never really saw Kenny Clark get to that level. Kenny Clark had a fine season. Neither of them put up, the sack numbers that we had hoped to maybe get to see. But I expect with an addition or two next season that's, selected by Gouda and Hafley for this defense, I think that the arrow's pointing very much up. And if we can get our offense to look anything like it looked like at the end of last season, we're going to be in a pretty good spot going into the 2025 seasons. Yeah, I mean, we could sit on here and talk for an hour on this. You got any closing notes from the Eagles game specifically? Because Rob and I are going to get on. We're going to create a lot of content. We're going to be talking more about kind of our grades for the season. We'll be talking about, what our off-season plan is for the Packers and to-do list. But you got any final thoughts from this Eagles game before we kind of put some closure on this and move on to 2025?
Yeah, well, it's on to draft season, now. So mock draft, PFF, here we come. Jordan and I both tend to do that quite a bit and send us snippets of our draft. So maybe, who knows? We'll talk about it too, but maybe we can get some of that content going for you guys too here as well. But, I hope, looking back at this, that this is just one of the bumps in what will be a really bright, young Packers team that can come and, get some more weapons and some more talent and draft really well and take this team to the next level. So I really hope we can take this as a deep learning lesson for the Packers, for the fans, for everybody, and hopefully come back next year stronger
and more mature, because they need to walk their talk now. And I think that comes with a tremendous amount of discipline, not only this off season, but in how they prepare for every game that they will play next season. I hope the lesson that they learned is that they know they're as talented as almost any team in the NFL. They need to understand that they need to prepare and be disciplined enough to execute every game, because nothing is going to be given to them on talent alone. So, and the last thing that I'll say before we maybe kind of round up some playoff things here is that with all the emotions of the end of the season, I think it's pretty easy to get radical, right? Whether it's Brian Gutekunst can't get a first-round draft pick, right? And if he would have hit on a couple of these guys, or if we would have, selected this guy over this guy, that, the team would be in a different place. And if Matt LaFleur, didn't suck at play calling at the end of the year, that, this would happen. And if it's Jordan Love, he's not really our franchise guy. So it's easy to say that after the emotions of the season ending, but, do we as a fan base really want to be in the company of the Browns and the Jets and the Jaguars, and name any other team who has consistent and constant changeover at the GM and head coach and quarterback position? I can promise you, as much as this hurts and it's not the outcome that we wanted, it is a much better place to be than for us to make radical decisions. This team is going to continue to grow. Matt LaFleur is going to continue to grow, and there's going to be a lot of expectations going into next season. And I think if we're having a lot of these discussions at the end of next season, it would be a lot more fair to us to critique and ask questions about the future of Matt LaFleur, Jordan Love, and other Packers at that point in time.
Agreed, man. Agreed.
So you guys know what happened in the playoffs, but, looking forward into next week, the Lions are going to play the Commanders. The Eagles are going to play the Rams. I, for one, was very happy to see the Rams whoop the Vikings' butts last night. I know the Vikings are very, very confident with their fan base, and I don't think that they were expecting that outcome. I'm happy to no longer see that team in the playoffs. How are you feeling about that, Rob?
I mean, come on. It's just chef's kiss. For how much crap as I get for my sister, who's a Vikings fan, and other Vikings fans, right? We all have a ton of friends that are Vikings fans. It's just, I really think that this year is the year. Nope. Try again.
And I don't envy their position at all with the decision that they now need to make with Sam Darnold, because that decision became infinitely more complicated and harder after the result of the last two games. He did not perform very well at all. He had 9 sacks. I think he took 9 sacks in yesterday's game. Good luck, Vikings, on making that decision. So,
right.
And then we got the Chiefs versus the Texans and the Bills versus the Ravens. I mean, if I'm being honest, I would love to see like a Bills-Lions Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Not going to pick a winner in that one just yet, but if I had my way, that's the Super Bowl I would love to watch at this point in time. So let's get some fresh blood in there. But that's it, Packers fans. Thanks for being here with us this season. We're entering the off season now. We plan to continue to produce great content. It's been a hell of a journey. Obviously, Rob and I started the week before the draft, and we've had a lot of fun doing this. We are best friends, and this is a great time for us to connect and spend meaningful time talking about something we love every single week. We got to go to a Packers game together this year. And it's just meant a lot to me. I want to thank my buddy Rob over here for all the work that he does and puts into this show. It really couldn't be possible without you. And, he really had the idea that he wanted to get this started and going. And, I'm thankful that you encouraged us to do this, Rob. So,
we also want to take a quick second to thank our wives for allowing the time. That can't be overstated. We're right
Absolutely.
back at you, my friend. Right back at you.
Without the blessing of Chris and Abby and the time they allow us to do this, that would not be possible. So, but thanks again, fans. If you're watching, like, subscribe, do all the things, a comment. Let us know what you think the Packers need to do going into the offseason. Give us something to talk about. We're going to have lots of time. But you can connect with us on X at Sounds Gouda. That's Rob's handle, and mine is Olson Jord. But until next time, Packers Nation, have a Gouda morning, a Gouda afternoon, and a Gouda night. Go Pack.
Go Pack.
Been wanted this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better.